the same thing happened. So I just always defaulted to whatever Ed said because, you know, he was there. And if the guy who was there wants to be wrong about it, that's fine by me. There are so many interesting lights to the story, from reopening cold cases to decades of data and testing and arguments that are still persistent about calibers and how police should approach suspects and things like that. It is by far one of the most influential events in law enforcement history, and I'm excited to talk about it. However, this being YouTube, and because we're going to be talking about things that are, actually, hold on, let me put on my disguise, 1 second. Okay, all right, yeah. Since we're going to be talking about things that go boom and people being shot and whatnot, I'm very thankful for the sponsor of today's video because it's really cool to get paid for doing work, if you could call all of this that.
Because if there's one thing that YouTubers get way too caught up on, it's money. And as someone who likes to keep their money, I know how frustrating.
This is going to die anyway, so we'll basically just be doing this as it. Just writing it. We don't have to program it. We technically all of you don't have to program
Subscriptions. So start being smart with your money and get a hold of Rocket Money today. Because right now there's never been a better time to get in on this offer. That's because right now if you head to the link in the description at rocketmoney.com/Wendigoon, you'll be able to get started with Rocket Money for free. That is right, for free. From the
case, but to make it the most interesting, why don't we start at the beginning? And in this story, that's our suspects. Those suspects being Michael Lee Platt and William Russell Maddox. Platt and Maddox seemed to live a rather uninteresting life until they met each other sometime in the 1970s. Maddox was a former Marine cook who would later enlist in the Army and become a military police officer. And Platt enlisted in the Army, went to air assault school, and then also became a military police officer. Sometime after 1973, both of the men were stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. It was after getting out of the military that both of the men's lives would take very brutal and suspicious turns. In December of 1983, Maddox and his wife were living near Columbus, Ohio. It was in Columbus, Ohio that Maddox's wife, Patty, worked as a cancer research doctor at the Methodist Hospital. Well, on December 30th of 1983, Maddox's wife and her co-worker were found tied up with their mouths gagged and their throats slit. Both of them were murdered at work, and to this day, the case remains unsolved. The same day this happened, Maddox's father cut his throat. More than likely got the news of what happened to his daughter-in-law, and his father was in constant care for his health until his death a few months later. Over the course of this, people around Maddox said that he had a religious awakening and became a diehard Christian and member of his church, while also, unbeknownst to most people, was the prime suspect in his wife's murder. Now again, he was never charged, and the case is officially cold as no one was ever tried for the murders. But given what we find out later, I wouldn't exactly put it past him. What we do know that happened because of Maddox's wife's death is Maddox received a pretty handsome insurance payout. Early FBI numbers say that the estimated value of this payout was $180,000, with some estimates being as high as $400,000. Either way, a lot of money. However, whatever the amount of money it was, didn't seem to be enough for Maddox as he became involved in the legal process, showing that the insurance company was taking out what he was deserved because of the local police department investigation. After Maddox's father died in the spring of 1984, it seems that Maddox didn't really have a reason to stick around in Ohio, so his buddy Platt invited him to come live with Platt down to Miami, Florida. While in the Army, Platt had met a woman in Virginia, and the two of them were married on Halloween of 1975. And from the outside looking in, seems to have a very lovely home life. Virginia was still Miami, Florida, so after Platt got out of the military, they moved down there. And as mentioned, since Maddox didn't really have anywhere to go, Platt invited Maddox to come down to be a part of his life. So much so that in 1984, Maddox bought a fourth of a company that Platt had started with his brother, a landscaping business called Blade Cutters. Platt had started Blade Cutters with his brother in 1982, leaving a job that he had with Regina's father to start the company. And Regina came onto the company as their bookkeeper. So Platt had a whole family business going on and invited Maddox into the fold. And things went fine for like less than a year. Because on May 17th of 1985, Maddox was effectively kicked out of Blade Cutters. Either his shares were bought up or dissolved because seemingly Platt's brother wanted nothing to do with it. The stated reason was personality differences, so he was out with it. And also, apparently after this, Maddox just spent a while making toys, like little wooden toys, at the Blade Cutters warehouse. So like they kick him out of the company, but he won't leave. So it's a landscaping company, and then the guy who used to own a fourth of it is just in the corner building trains or something. The reason I say it was probably Platt's brother that had a problem with Maddox is because just a few months later, in August of 1985, Maddox and Platt would start another landscaping business called Yankee Clipper. Now, one of the reasons this fallout probably happened between Platt and his brother and Maddox and all that is because of what happened shortly before all of this in December of 1984. Because on December 21st of 1984, Platt's wife Regina would take her own life, allegedly. So, according to the official report, Platt was in another room of his house when Regina took a shotgun and fired it into her mouth. There were no signs of a struggle. There was never any evidence to imply that it was forceful or Regina didn't act alone. However, what made people suspicious is several people around Platt had made comments to the effect that they were worried about Regina's safety around Platt leading up to this event. According to the FBI, there were allegations that Platt had been having an affair with a waitress up until October of 1984 that lasted for like 2 years. So the official narrative at the time was just that maybe Regina got word of that and could have lived with the depression that took her under. But friends of Regina would later recount that Regina had came to them in the week before her death, saying that she was afraid Platt was going to kill her. And one of Platt's friends would later say that Platt would say something to the effect of, "I'm just mad she killed herself because I wanted to do it." Similar to Maddox, even though there is no explicit proof or anything like that, it's not the kind of thing that could happen. Not helped by the fact that less than a month after Regina's death, Platt was married. To further complicate things, Platt had 3 children with Regina that he brought into this new marriage. I should also mention that Maddox had a daughter from his marriage with Patty, who was very young and also living with him down in Miami. But according to everyone else, people from the church, people from the community, if you didn't know about those pretty big blips in their history, they seemed to be model citizens. They attended church, their business was doing well. If you didn't know them one-on-one, everything seemed fine. However, people who did know them personally were very aware of some of the men's flaws. For example, Maddox, after he moved to Miami, had a habit of dating women for a couple weeks before asking them to marry him. He eventually married one woman who stayed with him for 2 weeks before they separated, and she would later go on to refer to him as a quote monster. In their short time together, she also became pregnant with his child, and after the child was born, he wanted nothing to do with it. Also in 1985, people who knew Maddox personally said that a lot of the conversations he would have always bordered on the morbid, something to do with death or his advance behind after he died. And he would also say cryptic things like he has a warehouse with Platt where they keep vehicles and weapons for their secret missions, which only later would people find out what that might be. There's also a couple of stories involving the two men that aren't explicitly confirmed, but they're too weird not to mention. For one, there is a story that got passed around in like local papers and rumors from like people who knew the two men that while Regina was still alive, Platt would apparently encourage her to sleep with Maddox. I don't know how true that is. Typically after, people do a really bad thing, everyone who ever knew them came out of the woodwork to talk about all these evil boogeyman stories that may or may not be real. Again, it's not like I put it past him. That just seems like a really weird side project. Which, if that is true, that certainly adds to the reason why Regina might have done the thing that she did. And another really weird story about them that the details can't be 100% confirmed, but at least some of it is real, is the story around a guy named Earl Burnett. So Earl Burnett had a business where he would sell people vending machines. And then, for some reason, in 1985, Platt and Maddox bought 10 vending machines. I have no idea what they were going to do with those, but they did it. And then according to Platt and Maddox, the vending machines were faulty. So they send the vending machines back to Burnett. Burnett says that the vending machines were fine when he sent them, so the two men must have broken in and then sent them back in order to get a refund. Apparently, the two men were so mad about this that in June of 1985, they drove to Lincoln, Nebraska. And that is not up for debate. Both the men as well as Burnett say that they went to Lincoln, Nebraska in June of 1985 to get their money back from Burnett. Burnett says they did this by showing up at his house at like 7 in the morning and then acting like they had guns in their coat pocket, ordered him to get in the car. Now, according to Platt and Maddox, they just wanted to talk about their refund, and either way, the three men ended up going to breakfast at a local restaurant. While they're there are police officers eating in the restaurant, to which Burnett runs over to them and begins to scream that the two men he is eating with are going to kill him. So this causes a whole scene. The police officers pat down Platt and Maddox, and it turns out they don't have any weapons on them, but Platt and Maddox are so mad about this, they get a lawyer and try to file a lawsuit against Burnett, and it became a whole thing for years, but it never really resolved up until the thing that these men would later do, time of forgiveness, right? Which had to be really weird for Burnett because I'm sure everyone thought he was crazy because he's literally the vending machine salesman and he's telling people that there's two men trying to kill him over his vending machine. I'm sure everyone thought he was insane until he might have actually sold vending machines to the two people in the country who would kill someone over vending machines. Well, the details of all of that are following. What we do know is over the course of 1985, the two men seemed to get better. Maddox seemed to be directionless. Sure, he had a daughter, but he had lost his wife by someone's doing and seemed to just kind of be doing odd job to make ends meet. And after the death of Regina, again by someone's doing, it could be assumed that Platt was in a similarly dark position. Either way, it seems that over the course of 1985, the two men had developed a want for more and devaluation of human life. And if there was ever a market to have that opinion, it was Miami in the 1980s. And it seemed that the greatest way to get rich fast, if you don't care about people, was bank robbery. According to Ed Morales, in the year leading up to the Miami-Dade shootout, there was a bank robbery in Miami, or a bank truck robbery, every day, with some days having as many as 5 robberies. Miami is the one place in the country that can give LA a run for its money when it comes to high crime. So perhaps one day when you guys read the papers and you turned on the news, you got an idea of how they can get rich quick, how they can step on a lot of people do. The first act of violence that we know the two men committed was on October 4th of 1985. Because on that day, that young man named Neil Brill went out shooting in Southwest Miami. There's this big rock pit off of the trailhead that people kind of use as just a dump site. So a bunch of local people knew it as a place you could go and set up camps and shoot around for fun. It was on that day that a 25-year-old man left his parents' house to go shooting at this dump outside of town. He drove away in his 1977 gold Chevy Monte Carlo and was never seen again. The next day, after his father couldn't find him the night before, his parents filed a missing persons report, but otherwise just had to wait. Now, this first robbery can't 100% be confirmed to be Platt and Maddox, but investigators believe it was just because of their MO and because afterwards people around them gave reasoning to why this should be them, so we're going to assume it is for now. Only 5 days after Emilio went missing, on October the 9th, 1985, a Loomis Wells Fargo bank truck was parked in front of a Steak and Ale restaurant at 12:30 p.m. to get a money pickup. These bank trucks would make their rounds to various businesses that have access to cash, and the bank truck would transport the money to the bank in order to make sure everything was safe and random people weren't getting robbed. The Wells Fargo truck consisted of a driver and a courier. The driver pulled up in front of the Steak and Ale restaurant, and the courier got out and inside to grab the cash. As the courier made his way back out of the restaurant with the duffel bag of cash, two men approached him and said, "Don't move while I shoot." The two men had, according to the courier, an M16 rifle and 45 caliber pistol, and were wearing ski masks, camouflage, helmets, and bulletproof vests. So the two robbers were holding the courier at gunpoint and leading him around to the back of the truck. They tell him to open the back of the truck, and And the courier says that the driver has the keys and he's the only one who can open it. So they drag the courier around to the front of the truck, and while pointing the gun at him, tell the driver to come open the back door or they'll kill the courier. And the driver just drives away. He just leaves that guy on his knees in Steak and Ale parking lot. And the robbers were so mad that they just started shooting at the back door of the bank truck as it drives away, which obviously doesn't do anything. So the courier's on the ground, and he's like, please don't kill me. So they hit him in the head, and then they drive away. But as they drive away, they throw out smoke grenades from the windows to cover their escape, I guess. And yeah, all they did was they stole the duffel bag that the courier had walked out with, which contained $2,825. So a big first score. It's company policy with a lot of those companies to just drive away, because the idea of if you stick around, there's larger chance someone will get hurt, or don't comply with the manager, whatever. I get all that. But it's just a funny visual. I imagine the driver was making eye contact with his friend, and just you can see him slowly reach down and put the truck in gear. Yeah, please don't hurt and get out. Also, the smoke grenades were incredibly dramatic. It's Miami at noon. There are 800 cars on the road. No one's going to find you. But what they will find is 2 smoke grenades in the middle of the highway. The courier said that the 2 men left in a blue or gray 4-door vehicle, and a bystander managed to get the tags on the vehicle. Probably wouldn't have been looking if there weren't smoke grenades in the road. And the plates came back as a match to a vehicle that was reported stolen a week earlier. At the same time this was happening, because again there was such a plethora of bank robberies happening in Miami at the time, that the FBI office in Miami had a division known as the C1 division. And C1's entire job was bank robberies. So the FBI agents at C1 responded to this event and started a profile on these bandits, who would later become known within the C1 as the Unknown Bandits. I guess a play on their ski masks, because they think they're so mysterious. Well, the FBI agents wouldn't have to wait long, because only a week later, on October the 16th, the Unknown Bandits would hit again. Oh, sorry, it's not the Unknown Bandits, it's the Unknown Gang. I'm going to keep calling them the Unknown Bandits. It sounds more demeaning. On October the 16th of 1985, another Wells Fargo truck was in the parking lot of a Winn-Dixie doing another pickup. For this arrangement, the Wells Fargo truck had 3 people working the truck that day: the driver, the courier, and a lookout. The way it worked is a lookout would walk up to the building first, wait a couple minutes to make sure there wasn't anyone, ready to jump out and rob them. And then the lookout would signal for the courier to come inside of the building. And then when it was time to leave, the lookout would wait at the front of the store until the courier was loaded up, and then they would signal for him to come onto the truck. So all of that went fine on the entry, but as they were making their way back out, the courier was halfway to the parking lot between the lookout and the driver, when suddenly the bandits would attack again. This time, as the courier is making his way across the crowded parking lot, one of the 2 men would run up wearing the same attire, the ski mask, the camouflage, and then yell, "Freeze," before shooting the courier in the thigh with a shotgun. Which I don't know what the point is in yelling "freeze" and then shooting someone. It's stupid. It's announcing that you're there before you fire a gun. Immediately, the driver and the lookout pull their guns and start returning fire on the guy who just shot the courier. As they're doing this, a second robber with some kind of rifle begins to fire back as well, and the 2 robbers get away without being shot and also without getting any money. And the courier who was shot in the leg survived and recovered, so really they just caused a lot of noise for no reason. It was really hard for the FBI to get anything out of this investigation, because there were a ton of eyewitnesses, but everyone claimed to have seen something different. Some people were saying that they saw a getaway driver, some people saying it was as many as 4 people. Everyone reported a different color and kind of car. I think what happened is there were just several cars in the parking lot, so when the shooting happened, someone just saw a car and assumed that had to be the car for some reason. Either way, it seems that the 2 were not happy about this botched robbery, because they did another one the next day. And if you thought the Winn-Dixie bank robbery was stupid, this one is incredibly stupid. On October the 17th, there was a Loomis truck that was picking up a delivery from a Dalt's restaurant. The parking lot was crowded, so the bank truck pulled into the alley right behind the Dalt's restaurant. As the courier is making his way outside, he's walking to the car, and behind the dumpster in the alley, he sees two men standing there with, again, an identified M16, just waiting on him to get close. And I swear I'm not kidding, that courier was the same courier from the Steak and Ale robbery a week earlier. So the guy who got left on his driver, just alone in the parking lot, was now about to be left alone in an alley. So in response, he sees the two men and without saying anything, drops the money bag, pulls his revolver, and shoots 4 times. That guy said absolutely not. What's really funny to imagine is he recognized them like in their stupid ski mask and camo and everything. But what's the point of camouflage in downtown Miami? But he sees the two of them, and like that just makes you stand out so much more. Anyway, he sees the two of them, and he's like, "You again?" Just like dumps the cylinder on it. Anyway, this time the two don't even shoot back. They see that the robber's not going in their favor, so they turn the corner and get out of there. It seems that the two men were unsatisfied with their lack of results because they would wait 3 weeks until their next robbery on November the 8th of 1985. On that day in the early morning, a Florida National Bank teller was working one of the drive-through windows attached to the bank. The little drive-through section that he was in was separate from the bank itself. So when he ran out of money, he had to walk across the parking lot to go back inside of the bank to get more money for the teller's stand. He grabbed $10,000 in cash and was being escorted by a guard back out to the teller stand. As if he were walking back to the teller stand, he heard someone yell "freeze" and turn around to see the unknown bandits standing there, pointing again an M16 and a revolver at the two men. They take the bag with the $10,000 and then demand for the teller to unlock his boot. The teller is so afraid and freaked out, and his hands are shaking so much that he breaks off the sheet to the boot inside of the lock. The robbers are upset by this and slap the teller in frustration, and then get into a black 4-door vehicle to be able to drive away. However, at what would happen? An off-duty police officer was in line for the drive-thru and saw all of this happen. He had his revolver with him and began to aim it at the two men through the windshield as they walked by. The robbers saw him pointing the pistol at them and raised their rifle, to which quickly the cop put the gun down. However, this didn't deter the cop because as soon as the men leave the parking lot, he leaves the line and begins to tail them through town. He does this for a few blocks before the two robbers stop the car on the road. One of them gets out, stands next to the back of the car, and points a rifle straight at the man, which is a pretty clear sign to stop following him. So this time the cop leaves, but in the process of telling them, he manages to get their plate number. This time when the C1 division responds to the robbery, this man is able to give a pretty detailed account of the suspect's ethnicity, build, relative weight. So perhaps the two robbers, after this event, figured that because they were willing to get violent and loud, they allowed some information about this to get out, which means that it's one step closer to the cop. This is a mistake, and it's not what happened to them. Because that same day, only 90 minutes after that robbery, they would rob another bank. About 18 blocks away and around noon, the two men would enter the professional savings bank, and this time it was a more traditional takeover bank robbery. The two men went in with guns, started pointing them at people, telling everyone to get down, and demanding for a teller to take them to the safe. They were sporting the same rifle and revolver that were reported at the bank robbery 90 minutes earlier. One of the two men, and we don't know if this was Maddox or Platt, because again, they were wearing masks through this whole thing, but one of the two men hopped over the counter and told one of the tellers to take them to the Wells Fargo drop-off. It seemed that they had been casing out the bank and knew that earlier that morning, Wells Fargo had dropped off duffel bags of cash. After threatening to shoot employees, the vault was eventually unlocked, and the men left with 3 duffel bags of cash worth $41,469. And eyewitnesses said that the pair drove off in a gold Monte Carlo. And it seems that after this one, the two had finally successfully robbed a bank or bank-related thing the way that they planned to rob it. There was no not being able to get into the truck, There was no key breaking off in the teller stand or whatever. If you combine that with the $10,000 they took at the bank an hour and a half earlier, they had made over $50,000. And it seemed that this satisfied the two men to some degree because they wouldn't hit another bank for a couple months. However, it seemed that letting the top tailwind from the earlier job in November was still ringing in their ears. Because when they did rob the bank again on January the 10th, 1986, they were much more violent. At 10:30 a.m., a Branch truck was performing a drop-off at a Continental Bank branch. The courier was standing at the back of the truck unloading bags of money, and all of a sudden, he was shot in the back. One of the two had ran up and shot the teller in the back with a shotgun, and as he laid on the ground, the other one walked over with his rifle and shot him twice more in the back. They grabbed the bags of money out of the back of the bank truck, threw them in the gold Monte Carlo, and drove away. Somehow, the courier was critically injured, but somehow he survived. Getting shot a lot and surviving is going to become a common theme as we continue through this story. Someone who was in the bank parking lot saw this go down and decided to tell the Monte Carlo as it left the bank. They followed the Monte Carlo to just a couple blocks down the road when the Monte Carlo parked in a Burger King parking lot, and the two men got out, took the money and weapons, got into a white Ford truck, and drove away. So this investigation was pretty easy for the C1 because when they showed up to ask questions, this guy was like, yeah, they're parked right there. So the FBI made their way over to the Burger King parking lot and investigated the Monte Carlo. While they weren't able to pull anything conclusively on Chris, the inside of the car was pretty junked up, they were able to get information from the plates. As the plates were registered to Emilio Brielle's father, the boy who was missing on October 4th, that I mentioned earlier. Initially, the police were suspicious of the Brielle family because the car was never reported stolen, so it didn't pop up in their system. But when Ed Morales, the guy who wrote the book about this whole thing, went to interview the family, he realized it's because they had just reported their son missing and the car was never officially stolen and it was the son that they cared about. Quite heartbreakingly, Ed Morales just takes Brielle's father out to the area where his son went missing, the rock pit outside of town. And he said he just drove around with the father all day, hoping they could find something about the boy. It would be a couple months later, on March the 1st of 1986, that Emilio's body was found. It seemed that the two men had shot Emilio in the head and then pushed his body off the side of a nearby trail into the surrounding swamps. What was left of Emilio was mostly bones and tattered clothes at that point. It seems that Platt and Maddox had killed the boy just so there wouldn't be any witnesses. And they didn't want to commit the robbery in their own vehicle, so they figured they'd just kill someone and take it. We know this because less than 2 weeks after Emilio's body was found, the two men would do the same thing again. On March the 12th of 1986, a man named Jose Collazo was at a target shooting near the area where Emilio disappeared, or as we know now, was murdered. He had driven out there in his black two-door 1979 Monte Carlo. As he was out shooting, he said two men pulled up in a white Ford F-150 and just parked near him, watching for him. Eventually, the truck drove down, and the two men stepped out of the vehicle with weapons pointed at him. They took his keys and asked him if he was a cop for some reason, for telling him to walk to a nearby pond. One of the two men ordered him to get down on his knees, and Jose, realizing where this was going, decided to fight back. As he went to turn, Jose was shot in the back and the arm before beginning a struggle for the rifle. As they fought over the gun, it went off again, this round hitting Jose in the side of the head, to which Jose, very smartly, played dead. The two men, assuming that he had been killed, stole his car and drove away in both vehicles. When they drove away, Jose got up and walked after having been shot 3 times several miles through the woods before getting to a nearby highway where he was able to flag down a car that was filled with a family on a tourism trip from Michigan who managed to call the police and get to the hospital. Now keep in mind, at this point, there's no connection between the series of bank robberies and this guy being shot and left for dead outside of the city with his vehicle stolen. It was the next day when one of the head investigators at the C1, an agent named Ben Grogan, saw the story in the newspaper and decided that's their guy. Because it was the same MO and location as Emilio's stay, Grogan correctly assumed that this must be them trying to get another vehicle to committing another robbery. But what they didn't count on this time was leaving Jose as a witness. So agents Ben Grogan and Jerry Dove go to interview Jose in the hospital, and Jose gives them a ton of useful information. He got a really good look at the guy, so he was able to provide police sketches and detailed attributes as to the men's voice and how they behaved. He was able to confirm that the rifle the man was carrying was a Ruger Mini 14, and because there weren't that many weapons found after the fact, I'm going to assume that all of the M16 reports from earlier robberies were actually this Ruger Mini 14, which helps establish a connection between those robberies and our bandits as we would know them to be now. And of course, Jose's plate number of NTJ891. Well, it seems after acquiring a new getaway car, the guys were excited to use it because they would commit their next robbery 1 week later. As a matter of fact, they would go back to the same bank they committed the January 10th robbery at, the one where the courier was shot 3 times and someone identified the gold Monte Carlo. This was another takeover robbery with them going in and being loud and jumping behind the desk so that they could steal money directly from tellers. At one point, again, either Platt or Maddox, we don't know, at the front door, yelled to whoever was stealing money from the tellers, "Hurry up, John," which obviously John was alias other than named John, but they thought they were so clever for that one. And the two would leave in a black Monte Carlo, to which a bystander confirmed the plate number, confirming that all of these were the same people. However, this takeover netted a much lower amount compared to their last robbery, as at this one they only stole $8,338. The C1 division wanted these people caught fast. It seems that they had no plans on stopping their robberies anytime soon, and they were willing to kill as many people as necessary in order to make it happen, even if it was just killing people in order to grab another getaway car. Which, by the way, I was thinking about this reading on the case. It seems kind of counterintuitive to steal cars from people who have guns, right? Like, why would you go to a shooting range or an area people are shooting at in order to steal their car? Wouldn't you want to be somewhere where people are more defenseless? But then, if they're planning on shooting that person, then it's probably good to go to an area that is already pre-established as having gunfire at it, or letting the person shoot for a little bit. That way, if a bystander hears a gunshot, they won't think anything of it. Anyway, C1 is doing everything they can to try to catch these guys. And one of the first things they do is simply driving around town looking for either the Monte Carlo and just writing down the license plate numbers of white Ford F-150s you see in suspicious places. The idea being, if you have a bunch of different plate numbers for white Ford F-150s, you can send them into the DMV, find out who that vehicle is registered to, and then you could show the images of those people in a lineup to Jose, who interacted with them indirectly. So in late April, early March, the C1 division did this, but it would take some time for the report to come back from the DMV. At this point, the C1 division had established a commonality in the unknown bandits' banditry. They always hit banks on Fridays, seemingly because that is when the money trucks made their drops. And the time between robberies would be shorter or longer, depending on how much money they took. Remember, the time that they didn't rob any more banks for a couple months was when they got $50,000. But at the last robbery on March the 19th, they only got $8,000, meaning that another robbery was probably going to happen soon. Because of this, C1 determined that on April the 11th, 1986, there was probably going to be another robbery. So they were going to do something called a bowler stakeout. Basically, they were going to have several FBI agents scattered around southern Miami where all the robberies took place, and they were going to case various banks or bank trucks and see if anything would happen. And even if they're not at the bank where a robbery is taking place, they will be in the area to respond to them. So on that morning, April the 11th, 14 FBI agents broke up into 11 different cars, began their patrol in southern Miami. I can't really do this amount of time justice as much as Ed Morales does in his tone and everything. He goes into great detail about how jovial the tone was between everyone that day, how they were excited to catch the bad guys, but no one really thought, no one knew what would happen next. The morning started out casual. People took their positions at various banks around town. They radioed into each other what they were doing. Someone said they needed to go to the bathroom. Someone said they'd be out of service for a while. Everything was normal until 9:30 a.m. Agents Grogan and Dove, the same ones who interviewed Jose, and Grogan, the same one who made the connection about Jose in the first place, was parked at the Barnett Shopping Center that had a bank attached to it. By coincidence, there was a local police officer also parked in the parking lot of the shopping center that morning. All of the FBI agents were in unmarked cars in order to not raise any suspicion. At 9:30 a.m., Grogan and Dove are sitting in their vehicle when all of a sudden, a black two-door vehicle that might be a Monte Carlo drives into the parking lot, seemingly sees the police officer parked in the parking lot, and then drives away. Dove and Grogan think that's kind of weird and decide to start tailing it. They report to the other agents on the radio that they're following up on this lead, but again, as far as they know now, it's just a two-door black vehicle. Nothing conclusive yet. However, 1 minute later, at 9:31 a.m., Grogan calls out that not only is it a two-door black Monte Carlo, but it has the same license plate. I cannot properly describe how stupid that is. Like, yes, they thought they left Jose for dead in the Everglades, sure, but at this point, the license plate had been plastered on newspapers, it had been plastered on the news, the FBI were throwing NTJ 891 out everywhere to try to get some lead. And for these guys who are so down to steal everything, can you not just like pull a license plate out off a car in a parking lot? Like, why is that where you draw the line? You'll shoot someone in the head, no problem, but you won't bring a Phillips head screwdriver, I guess. But that's another thing that annoys me so much. So many bank robbers that otherwise would have completely got away with it get arrested because of a license plate. There was the one in, I think it's Tacoma, Washington, where like 4 Army Rangers, like super well-trained guys, performed like a perfectly executed bank robbery. They were in and out in 2 minutes. It was going great. But they took the back license plate off of their car, but they didn't take the front one off. So someone ID'd the car, and then the police just drove to their house and arrested them. And there was that other one, what's her name? Cowboy Bob. I think what was her real? Peggy Jo Tallis. Yeah. She was a robber who the police didn't even know they were looking for for like months, because she would do her robberies in a get-up to make her look like an old man. So the police thought they were looking for an old man, only to find out that it was a woman. And you know how they found out? Because she used her car with the plates on. Why are people okay with I'll bring a gun, I'll shoot someone, but if you ask me to mess with like DMV regulations, that's my line in the sand. That's not related to, I'll get back to the shootout, okay? So at 9:31 a.m., Grogan calls out that this is the car they're looking for, and all the FBI agents start to converge on their position. At this point, they're following the Monte Carlo through traffic, and there's enough cars between them that it's not suspicious. So the other agents are just trying to casually make their way through traffic, no blue lights or sirens or anything, to not give up the game. In a case of just bad luck, several of the agents were out of earshot of the radio when this call was made. Keep in mind, this was at a time when radios were much less effective than they are now, and were also relegated to the inside of the car. You couldn't bring them with you when you went in places. 2 agents were out using the bathroom when the call came in. Another one was out of service filling up the car with gas when the call came in. And another one was reporting to a bank telling them their area was anything suspicious. So at the exact moment that the FBI needs as many people as they can on this, 4 vehicles are out of earshot. Eventually, 2 other FBI cars managed to get behind the Monte Carlo. I already mentioned the one that Grogan and Dove is driving, that is the closest to the Monte Carlo. But then second behind Grogan and Dove is a car with Hanton and Morales in it, and then behind them is a car with Agent Manazzi in it. So the 3 FBI vehicles are tailing the Monte Carlo, and it's not really sure what Maddox and Platt were thinking at this time. Maybe they saw the cop car and were just calling off the robbery for the day, or maybe they were driving to another bank, who knows. But eventually, the Monte Carlo starts to make its way into less and less crowded roadways, until 3 pristine vehicles following them at every turn starts to become suspicious. At some point, it seems that Platt and Maddox caught onto this because they start performing nonsensical maneuvers to see if the three cars are still following. Have you ever heard the saying that if you ever think you're being followed, just make 3 right turns and see if the car's still following you? Because if you make 3 right turns, you're going the opposite of the direction you were originally heading, right? So Monte Carlo does that. It makes 3 right turns. And the FBI agents, knowing that they look suspicious, can't bear to let the car get away. Because think about it, right? They don't know anything about who the unknown bandits are in the Monte Carlo. They don't know their names, they don't have any data about them. They just know that they're willing to kill a lot of people, and that is definitely in the car. So even if you get suspicious, even if you give yourself away, you can't afford to let these guys get away because who knows who they'll kill again. The Monte Carlo starts driving real slow, and then the 3 FBI agents behind them have to start driving real slow, and it's eventually apparent to everyone that the jig is up. Agent McNeil, who was catching up to them, just so happened to be driving the other direction of the convoy, and said that as he drove by, he saw the passenger of the vehicle loading up a rifle. And given everything that the FBI knows about these guys, it is very unlikely that they will go away quietly. So then the FBI has to ask themselves another question. If this is going to be a gunfight, where do we want it to happen at? Because South Miami is a very crowded area. There is a huge chance of catching someone in a crossfire. Eventually, the Monte Carlo turns onto 82nd Avenue in southern Miami. It's hard to see now because the area's been developed so much more since then. But at the time, this was a much more relatively sparse area compared to the streets around it. A few streets to the east, and you had a large neighborhood that had a school. And to the west, you had a very busy highway. There's no telling what the men in the Monte Carlo would do if they got desperate. And the FBI knew, it was now or never. They began to communicate this to each other over the radio, saying things like, now's the time, we have to go, let's do it, until finally Ben Grogan said over the radio, take them, felony car stop, let's do it. Grogan threw the blue light into the dash of his unmarked car and initiated a traffic stop. As he does this, Grogan pulls the car all the way around to get in front of the Monte Carlo. And Hampton, seeing his play, pulls into the left lane, getting on the left side of the Monte Carlo. Meaning now, the vehicle is boxed in and can only drive off the road or stop. The Monte Carlo takes the third option and begins to speed up, hitting Grogan's car and trying to slam Hampton's car out of the way. This keeps up for a few seconds until Minozzi, seeing the play the other FBI agents are doing, speeds his car up that was previously third in line and rams the back of the Monte Carlo. This has the intended effect of causing the Monte Carlo to lose control, but because Hampton and the Monte Carlo were like hitting each other from the left and right, when the Monte Carlo gets knocked out of the way, it causes Hampton to lose control. And his car with Moreau and Hampton veers off and runs into the concrete wall of a nearby substation. The Monte Carlo completely loses control and gets turned all the way around, now facing the north direction, the direction that the FBI and the Monte Carlo had previously come from. This gives the bandits a clear shot because now all of the FBI vehicles are to the south, and there is a wide open way to get onto the highway to the north and make an escape. Minozzi sees this and is determined to not let the men get away, so he uses the only thing at his disposal, the car he's driving, and rams it full speed into the side of the Monte Carlo. This pushes the car all the way across the road and through the driveway of a house off 82nd Avenue, where it stops by hitting a car parked in someone's driveway. Minozzi, coming out of the haze of the wreck he just caused, sees the door of the Monte Carlo open and a shotgun barrel stick out, while a rifle barrel from the passenger seat aims over the driver's seat, pointed directly at him. Minozzi panics and quickly throws open the door to get out of the way, and as he does, the first shots of the shootout are fired at 9:35 a.m. What would occur over the next 5 minutes is probably some of the most discussed 5 minutes, I would argue, in law enforcement or gunfight history. So why don't I just show you a stupid little diagram of all of this in the only stupid little way I know how. Look, if you wanted something that wasn't this, you wouldn't be here. Okay? I'm not even going to be sorry about it. Let's just talk about it. So So this direction is to the north and this direction is to the south. Originally, the convoy was driving this way with McNeil driving the other direction. He's the guy who said he saw the guy in the passenger seat loading a rifle was driving north there. When the Nazi ran into Platt and Maddox, it caused Hamlin and Morales to spin out of control and hit a wall. Again, Platt and Maddox were now faced northbound, so as they tried to move, the Nazi hit them, and that's why their two cars were stopped here. McNeil, who had passed the convoy, did a U-turn to catch back up, and after the wreck happened, he pulled in right here to assist Manasseh. Andy Grogan and Dove, who were at the front and out of the car wreck, did a U-turn and stopped here in order to get out and try to apprehend the suspects. Now, before the wreck even happened, Manasseh had made a fatal error. It's not uncommon, especially if you're sitting in a vehicle and your gun belt's kind of in an uncomfortable position. It's not uncommon if you're expecting to use it to take the gun out and set it somewhere in the car. However, Manasseh had done that not expecting himself to get into a car. When they were originally driving this way and Manasseh hit Platt and Maddox from the rear end, as he made contact, it jarred his passenger door open and the gun flew in that direction. So Manasseh thought that his gun had flew out of the car when in reality it was just wedged between the passenger seat and the door. That's probably one of the reasons that Manasseh made the charge when he did. He didn't have a gun to stop these guys anymore, so he just used the car. So everyone came to a stop at 12201 Southwest 82nd Avenue, which I'll show actual demonstrations and street view and stuff like that here now, so you can understand where my visions come from. As mentioned earlier, Manasseh saw the driver door open and a shotgun point towards Grogan and Dove. Over the driver's shoulder, he saw someone else point a rifle directly at him, and being unarmed, he had no other option than to open the driver door and roll out of the vehicle. From what we know now, Maddox was driving and Platts was in the passenger seat. As Manasseh rolls out of the car, Platts fires at him. Now, initially, Manasseh thought he had been hit by a shotgun blast in the back, but what had actually happened is one of the .223 rounds from Platt's Mini 14 rifle had fractured across the steel of Manasseh's vehicle and had hit him in a scatter across the back. A lot of the stuff I'm going to describe is going to be very scattered, but what you have to understand is all of this happened incredibly fast. If I'm describing one person or set of events, and you're like, what's the other guy doing during this time? There's probably 3 seconds between the two different actions. So it's not like people were just standing around waiting for the next event to happen. I'm breaking down a lot of things that pretty much happened all at once. Just to clean up the board a little bit, Manasseh, again thinking that his gun had fallen from outside of the vehicle, crawls in this direction behind the car and looks in the center of the street where he thinks his gun might have fallen out at. Manasseh can't find it, and as he's continuing to be shot at, Manasseh eventually makes his way around to a wall that is running along the west side of the road. We'll go ahead and draw the wall here just so you remember it's there. Manasseh would take cover behind this wall for the remainder of the gunfight. Now, a lot of people write Manasseh off for this. They'll say, this guy's a coward, how could he hide behind a wall while his friends are being shot at, or whatever. But I want to remind you, he doesn't have a gun, and they have a lot of gun. So I don't really know what you'd want him to do. He didn't have a spare in his vehicle. He didn't know of any of the other officers having a spare. Should they have brought more? Sure, but now is not the time to have hindsight. And I also want to keep in mind that the whole reason they were stopped in the first place is because Manasseh, completely unarmed, decided to ram his car directly into them. Also, I would like to see you being shot in the face by a rifle over and over. Still try to find your gun in the middle of the street before you seek cover. There was another incident that happened when the cars came to a stop as well. So Ben Grogan always wore glasses. He had these thick rimmed glasses that allegedly it was hard for him to see without. I've heard it debated as to how blind he was without his glasses. Some said he couldn't see a thing. Others said that Hank was kind of blurry. Who knows? But either way, when the car slammed to a stop, Ben's glasses flew off of his face. Being unable to recover them, Grogan and Dove step out of the vehicle, and Grogan yells, "FBI, you're under arrest." At the same time this is happening, McNeil moves up to Mazzozzi's car to give him cover as Mazzozzi makes his way to the vault. At the same time this is happening, Morellis and Hamlin move up to help their boys. Hamlin makes his way over to Grogan and Dove, while Morellis moves over to help McNeil. Keep in mind there are gunshots flying in the midst of all of this, and about 20 seconds has passed, maybe 15, a very short amount of time. McNeil is laying over the hood of the car, shooting his revolver, but he is laying so close to the hood that he has to hold the revolver sideways as he fires 4 shots. And if you're wondering why it was pressed so hard into the hood, keep in mind that Platt is still firing rifle rounds in this direction. Morellis gets over to the back of McNeil's car, and as he turns the corner, he sees that McNeil is firing at the top of the hood. Where's that shotgun at? Morellis has his gun trained around the front of Maddox and Platt's vehicle, but as he turns the corner, he sees that he's aiming right at McNeil. Not wanting to accidentally fire towards McNeil, Morellis lifts his gun like this for a moment. As soon as he does, a bullet flies from Platt's rifle directly towards Morellis' chest. However, because of the position he moved his arm into, the rifle round instead hits his arm, the bullet fracturing through his forearm and effectively mutilating him. Morellis thinks that he has run into the back of McNeil's truck because he's so hyped up and amped up from being in a gunfight that he's just running and then something stops him all at once, not realizing he's been shot. It wasn't until he fell to the ground and looked at his arm, something he would describe as a mangled piece of roadkill that he didn't even recognize as himself. So for the time being, Morellis is lying somewhere between McNeil and Mazzozzi's car, just almost dying. Because if his arm being decimated wasn't bad enough, a fragment round at some point sparks off the ground and hits him in the side of the head, injuring his temporal artery. It would be described that every time his heart pumped, blood would shoot 8 feet out the side of his head. So yeah, Morellis isn't doing so good, so we'll come back to him in a minute. I should also mention Morellis was the only one here equipped with a shotgun. Everyone else had a handgun, either revolvers or a 9mm. It was also around this stage that 2 agents, Gilbert and Ron, had arrived from the northbound direction. The 2 of them were part of the stakeout and had just got to the meetup late. So they came and parked on this side of the road and provided covering fire throughout the rest of the shootout. And again, they're equipped with a revolver and a 9mm, so there's not a ton they can do to punch through the hull of the car. But, you know, it's the thought that counts when it comes to support fire. Another reason they parked here where they did is because the only avenue of exit these 2 have is if they take off towards the neighborhood further north. But there's no way the 2 of them could make a break for it without Gilbert and Ron seeing. So Platt was still in the passenger seat firing this direction, and as mentioned earlier, Maddox is in the driver's seat aiming backwards towards these 3. Ben Grogan, who mind you is at least partially blind during this whole thing because he lost his glasses, is credited as getting the first hit as one of his handgun rounds hits Maddox in the right hand. But the fragment from another shot, or someone else's over here, also striking Maddox in the cheek. Morellis, starting to come out of his haze, looks over at his left arm, which at this point is attached by one strip of skin on his forearm, and in frustration and delirium, he throws the useless arm out of the way and grabs his shotgun, which is a problem because as a pump action, you kind of need, 2 hands to pump it, but he hasn't got that far yet. Platt eventually realizes they're going to die if they don't move quick, and also they are pushed too close against the car that is parked here to open the door. So Platt shatters the passenger window and begins to crawl out of it. As Platt is climbing out of the passenger window, facing away from the gunfight, Dove would fire a round that is probably the most debated shot in law enforcement history, if not just like defense shooting history ever. Dove, standing from about 15 yards out, fired a shot of his 9mm, which was shooting a 115 grain hollow point round. Platt was pushing himself out of the window in a position similar to this, and Dove's round came and hit his right bicep before crossing over into his chest and lodging itself in his lung about 2 inches from his heart. Visibly, Platts winced at this and lost his footing for a second. This was a remarkable shot on a moving target for 15 yards in the midst of all the gunfight and confusion. And you would think, oh, someone shot in the chest like that should hypothetically be a kill shot. And you'd think that, wouldn't you? I mean, at the very least enough to get him to quit shooting back, but again, we'll get to that. Platt stumbles his way over to the front of these cars and at some point is hit again in the thigh and in the foot. At the same time, the 2 agents over here see Platts getting out and fire more shots to him, one of them hitting him in the right arm and in the chest. The right arm, it would later be found, severed his radial